Happy Tuesday morning, everybody. I'm Matt Scalisi, and we are back once again to talk about the big news going on around the SEC. We're in particular focused on Alabama today, but we might get into some of the other schools around the league as well. And we're actually joined by a guest today, which I'm really excited about. Before we get to our guest, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my two regular co-hosts here, Mr. John Talty over on my right, and Matt Zenitz at the bottom of your screen. Guys, an eventful national championship game in basketball, though not pertinent to our friends in SEC country this time. But going on around the league, and this is the time of year that we're getting to see some recruits coming up from the high school ranks, finally making their way and getting their first taste of college. Knows a lot about that side. Why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest today?
Yeah, so we're going to be bringing on somebody who I think is well known in the football world, was a very good player back in the day, and now is involved in the coaching world. So fortunate to have Cris Dishman coming on with us this morning. Cris played in the NFL for more than a decade as a defensive back, made multiple Pro Bowls, and has been involved in coaching for the last decade or so at this point, and has some diversity there in terms of the coaching part of it. So has worked in the NFL, worked for the Chargers, working with their defensive back group, worked at Baylor at the college level, working with their defensive back group, and actually now is at IMG Academy down in Florida, one of the premier high school football programs in the country down there, obviously producing high-level talent on a yearly basis. And Cris is entering year 2 at IMG. So first of all, Cris, we appreciate you coming on with us today. Hey, how did that all come about with IMG last year? What was kind of the process for you leading up to ultimately taking that job?
Well, my daughter went to 4 years here at IMG. First learned of IMG because I used to recruit here when I coached at Baylor. Then my daughter went to 4 years here at IMG. And when the XFL folded, I was fortunate enough to come back here to Bradenton, Florida, and the position was open. And I hopped over here since I'm only 5 minutes away from the school.
Good stuff. So, yeah, I obviously, like I said, year in and year out, IMG producing high-level talent as far as recruits. And us being based here in Alabama, there are a couple of people that I know people in the Alabama world are very much familiar with as far as incoming freshmen who have come out of there at IMG that are part of this year's recruiting class who you were around during the course of last season. So Ja'Cory Brooks, a 5-star wide receiver, J.C. Latham, a 5-star offensive lineman. Starting with Ja'Cory, what do you feel like people should know about Ja'Cory? Obviously, a guy that just from a practice standpoint, your DBs had to go against every day and match up against.
He's a never say never guy. He's a very hard worker. He got very good hands, good route running ability. You know, he got everyone keeps saying he's not as fast but he got, once he get going, he got good top end speed. But he's a very good route runner. Hand-eye coordination is very good. You know, like I say, the guys I can compare him to is someone like his work ethic is like a Jerry Rice. He's going to work extremely hard. He's going to be on time. He's going to be he's going to be yes sir, no sir type of person. You tell him to do something, he's going to do it. He's a pleaser to no end.
And I obviously, just going back to when you played, you matched up against guys like Jerry Rice, some of the great receivers of the last 20 years. Just in terms of the overall skill set to go along with the work ethic part of it, who else does he remind you of from just a skill set standpoint that maybe you matched up against during the course of late 80s, 90s, and all?
Well, he's a tweener, you know. I call him. He got a mixture of a lot of guys that I've covered in the past. You know, they got the speed of an Andre Rison, the hand-eye coordination of a Jerry Rice, the toughness of a Michael Irvin. So he's a all-in-one type of guy that he got all these different stuff that he can do. You know, he's not afraid to block. not afraid to go across the middle. So he's a guy that's gonna hopefully have a long career there at Alabama.
That's some pretty high praise, though, comparing him to some of those guys. So, JC, obviously one of the top-ranked overall recruits in this year's recruiting class. I think the 24/7 composite had him as not only the number 1 ranked offensive tackle, but I think they ultimately had him as the number 2 overall player. What should people know about JC, though?
Don't take his soft smile, his soft speaking, as meaning that he's soft. He's very, very mean inside the lines. He got a mean streak with him. He's gonna, like I said, he also is a leader on and off the field. He's gonna be exactly where you want him to be. He's not gonna take a back. He's not gonna back down from anyone. He's gonna accept all challenges, and he's gonna try to excel in all challenges.
Cris, I want to ask you kind of on a more general basis, because obviously you've been around the game at every level at this point. You've seen it evolve over decades, and now you're at a part of really a place that is developing talent at a very, very high level. And it's what's going on at IMG is not really something that was happening at all a couple of decades ago when you were coming up. I would like to know kind of your perspective on how much it's changed, the process that a young elite prospect goes through on his path to, let's say eighth grade freshman year, when you're just sort of realizing that you've got a lot of physical potential. How much has the process changed for kids like that going through high school and into college from maybe just over the past couple of decades, certainly from when you were coming up?
Well, these kids now have so much pressure on them. They have to win now. Back then, we had a chance to develop players. Like me, I was a slow boomer, so I was developed into the way I was. Now, today's kid, they have to be ready right now. Coaches need them ready right now because their jobs depend on them winning. So these kids now have so much pressure on them. Just going to one of my son's 8th grade game, he already have high schools out there everybody wanting to go to his high school, come to my high school, come to high school. Now kids are getting recruited in 8th grade, which is crazy, going to go to different high schools. Whereas when I grew up, I already knew which high school I was going to, either the high school that's in my district or another high school that my mom and dad could afford to pay to get me to. So it's the pressure of the win now mentality, and you have to be developed right now. So it's the pressure of these guys having to win now is making them. Then you have all the not the AAU, but you have all the 7-on-7 tournaments and the big man challenges, and everyone want to be a 5-star, and everyone want to be ranked the number 1 player instead of just being a good player. Everyone want to be the top player. So the kids got so much pressure on them now to win now and want to be the top player.
Sure.
Well, for those who aren't aware, Cris, you got a young Coach Saban with the White Bears in Houston before he even became a head coach. So I'm curious, you got 2 guys going to Alabama. I don't know if you had this conversation with them, but if you did or didn't, what kind of advice would you have given to them, given your experience playing for, young Coach Saban before he became, what we know him as today?
Coach Saban is a very organized, very thorough person. He's going to expect more than a normal coach will. But Coach Saban used to always tell me that his expectations of me should never be any higher than what your expectations of yourself should be. So that's what I loved about Coach Saban. He always saw more in you than what you actually saw in yourself. And my advice to those guys was go there, keep your nose clean, yes sir, no sir, and be where you're supposed to be. It's one thing about Coach Saban. If you do what you're supposed to do and be where you're supposed to be, then that's how you get on his good side. But if you try to cut corners and everything, then you can fear the wrath of Coach Saban.
Do you think he's loosened up at all? Do you sense that he's lightened up in that aspect much?
By far, and winning helps you lighten up. You know, he's a very good coach. He's a very thorough coach.
Sure.
So, like I said, some of the DB drills that I do right now, I got from Coach Saban when Coach Saban coached me in 1988. I'm still doing those drills because those drills actually work. You know, they're not the flashy of drills, and they're not all the footwork keys and all the footwork drills you see today. They don't even really help you in football, but all the kids like to do them because they're flashy. The drills I have and Coach Saban gave me is the drills that actually work on a football field. It's a very technique-driven coach, and that's why he gave me such a solid foundation when I was young that as I went on to my 12 years after Coach Saban was gone from me, I was able to still keep a solid foundation because of what he instilled in me at a young age.
Yeah. Old Willer days. So, wait, when you played under Coach Saban, at that point you were a rookie. I mean, that was your first NFL defensive back coach, and I think people very much remember those old Oiler teams. Did you have any favorite stories from those late '80 Oiler teams or working with Coach Saban specifically?
Well, it's just the drills he used to have us do every day. And every day we did the same drills. And I always wanted to do more. And he's like, why do more? Why do something else if these drills work? It was always the same drills. And now looking back as a coach, I know what he was doing now. He was getting that muscle memory. Defensive backs are all about muscle memory. What do you do in practice and what you're going to do in the game? If you don't practice the stuff in practice, then you're not going to do it in the game. And that's what he used to always try to get is a muscle memory of every day doing the same thing every day, having the same footwork, having the same step, having the same hand placement, you know, and those drills instill in me. Like I said, I do it for my guys today, and I tell them the same thing that Coach Saban tell me. Why fix it if it's not broke? You know, you can improve it, but don't try to do anything different. So of him just doing drills with me, having the belief in me, and just, you know, he's very demanding. Everyone say he's a screamer, he's a yeller, he's a fusser. I never looked at Coach Saban that way. I always looked at him as very demanding. And who don't want to be coached? Any great player, any good player want to be coached. Any good player know that you have to be demanding, and especially in the back end where you can lose and win games in a matter of seconds. So in today's football, where it's a passing league, you have to be so solid in your technique back there that if a coach is too demanding on you, then that's not the position you need to be playing.
Cris, it's been a big issue for Coach Saban in particular, really for the past several years, but he's brought it up a good bit in the last year. This aspect of how much the game has changed and how big a focus there is on offenses and how much of a disadvantage it puts defenses at these days. Particularly, it seems like defensive backs. So, what are your feelings about this? Is it going to take a big change for guys like you in the way that you coach defensive backs? Is there anything you guys can do to sort of adjust to the way that the game is shifting?
Well, you realize the quarterback going to have 3 seconds. So as I tell my guys now to put your work in early, put your work in within the next 5 yards. You got 5 yards to hit this receiver, rough him up as much as you can. So therefore, your discipline in the first 5 yards can carry you on into the 10, the 12, and the 15-yard mark, because that quarterback is not going to have time to keep looking at that player. But if you don't put your work in within the first 5 yards, then you may have an opportunity of getting the football thrown your way. So and that's why I just tell them, is just as defensive backs, we can't change no matter how the offense changes. The quarterback still got to throw the ball to that receiver. And if we roughen that receiver up enough and that pass rush is getting to that quarterback, then we stand a chance. But if they start making a game where we have to push the quarterback down, you can't hit the quarterback. If they take away the 5-yard mark of not hitting the receivers, then the game will change a lot.
So, Cris, one more. So, obviously, you guys are going through the process of spring stuff right now. In terms of players that are still at IMG, who are some of the ones that maybe you guys as a staff particularly excited about going into the year that maybe people in the college world or recruiting world should start to take a look at and just be aware of going into this season that you feel like have big potential when it comes to projecting to the college level?
Oh, well, I don't think we have enough time for that. We have, and I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, so I hope people don't take it that way, but we have a slew of guys defensively and offensively that can play in the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC. They can have their pick of the litter where they want to go. I only can speak on the position I coach. My back end guys, I have 5 guys in the back end possibly can play in the SEC or anywhere and be great players. And it's crazy the talent that we have here. And I'm just so fortunate enough to coach these guys, and they're actually listening, and hope I can springboard them on to college. So therefore, when they get to a coach like a Coach Saban, or like a Kirby Smart, or like a Dabo, once they get to their college's campus, they be ready to play, physically and mentally. Because you also got to realize the mental part of the football also. Everybody always look at the physical, but you got the mental part of football that you have to be ready to play. Are they good in the classroom? Are they good note takers? Can they be a one-time guy? As coaches, we want guys to be one-timers. We don't want to. We want to tell you 2 or 3 times about something. If I tell you one thing, you can cipher it and go through and do it. You're going to make my job a lot easier, which will make you a better player. So that's what we're looking for, one-timers.
Good stuff. We definitely appreciate you taking a few minutes to come on today. If people want to follow Cris and just keep up with what's going on down there at IMG, can follow Cris on Twitter at Dishman_Cris. Some great insights today. And like I said, Cris, we really appreciate you taking a few minutes to come on and share some of that insight.
Well, good. Thank you, guys. You guys have a great day, okay?
Thank you so much,
You too, Cris. Thank you so much. That was great.
Before I leave, ask Corey about his defensive back experience.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Big expectations for us throwing out comparisons to some of those guys. It's raised my expectations even more for Jacory now.
Yeah, ask him about his one snap of defensive back, I guess.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much, Cris.
Thank you, Cris.
Right, have a great bye.
Awesome. Well, thanks again to Cris Dishman for joining us as our guest here. Our first guest that we've had on First Down South on the show. We hope to have more of that coming up in the rest of the offseason. But let's turn quickly here, guys, to spring football again. It was a pretty important weekend in Tuscaloosa as Alabama had their first spring scrimmage. We know that there's an ongoing quarterback battle happening right now. Now, obviously, it's been stated pretty explicitly at this point that there does seem to be a front runner. But Matt, you've had a report out there of some intel that you got from this spring scrimmage. What can you tell us about how this thing went down and maybe what were some of the highlights from it?
Yeah. So I'll break this up into a couple parts. So just overall with the scrimmage, I think combination of the scrimmage and through this point of spring ball, that the defense is ahead of the offense. The first and second groups defensively both did well overall based on the feedback that I've gotten in that scrimmage. The front seven seems to be in very good shape going into this year. And I would say that overall defensively, that they seem to be in position where they should be in good shape from a defensive standpoint going into this year. But the first and second groups, as far as the defense, made it difficult on the offense during the course of the scrimmage. And even that second front seven, that second team front seven, made it difficult for the first team offense to run the ball consistently. And that obviously bodes well for some of the young players that they're going to be relying on to help them from a depth standpoint going into this year. So definitely reason for the staff to be encouraged about the defense at this point. To go over to the offense, while there were some issues moving the ball against the defense, especially in the running game. I think that it was a solid performance. Just looking at Bryce Young specifically, the quarterback who's obviously the favorite at this point to take over from Mac Jones as the starter, it was a solid first showing for him in terms of spring scrimmage this year. So the format of the scrimmage was to start out ones against twos before eventually shifting to some situational work where during red zone portion of practice, you saw ones against ones, twos against twos, so on. But during the course of the beginning part of the scrimmage where it was ones against twos, Bryce had 2 touchdown passes at that point, one to Javon Baker that was a little bit longer of a touchdown, and then had another one to tight end who seemed to be off to a good start to the spring in Camlet too. Then eventually when they shifted to the situational stuff, when it was ones against ones during red zone stuff, Bryce had 2 additional touchdown passes, one to Xavier Williams and then the second one to Camlet too. So it was a good start for him in terms of getting out there in a scrimmage setting and showing some of what he could be able to do. The front seven, especially when you got into the ones against ones portion of it, seems like continued to generate pressure there with guys like Will Anderson and Chris Allen. But for Bryce, off to a good start, and obviously coming out of the scrimmage, the feedback was good from Nick Saban to go along with that.
John, we didn't see a ton of Bryce Young last year. We was basically entirely mop-up duty, but little flashes here and there. What are I guess what's kind of the thing that you need to see out of Bryce Young for you to be really sold on him? I mean, obviously we know that he was a big-time recruit coming in. We know that nice things have been said about him. Is there sort of a moment that you're looking for? Is there something that would sort of suddenly give you the confidence to say this Alabama team is serious business with Bryce Young under center?
Now, and I think I'm going to give a very unsexy answer here, but I think the answer is consistency. I think we've talked about the flashes. We know the talent's there. I think you want to see him be able to consistently, do what he needs to do, and I think we've seen that from past Saban quarterbacks. It's certainly something that he values, and I think the reason why you didn't see a ton of him last year, Mac Jones was incredible, and I think Bryce just wasn't there at that point yet. So I think you just want to see him consistently put forth a good performance. I know it's still an open competition. At this point, I would be shocked if it's not Bryce, just given his talent level and what we've heard about him to this point. So I think you just want to see him, continue to develop his relationships, with his receivers and tight ends and all that, and just, not force mistakes. And it seems like, during the first spring scrimmage, he did a good job of not doing that.
I do. I'm racking my brain a little bit, but I'm trying to think of a quarterback that had less meaningful playing time going into his first start than Bryce Young. I mean, I guess it's probably Jalen Hurts is the answer, because he essentially ended up taking over the starting job in his very first game as a true freshman on campus. But it's not something that many Alabama quarterbacks have been put in a position to do. Even Mac Jones, he played pretty substantial amounts of in relief for Tua after Tua went out in 2015. Tua obviously was getting a good amount of playing time sort of behind for that job as well. So it's a little bit new territory, at least new for the last several years, to see we're basically going in blind on Bryce Young in terms of meaningful game experience coming into this season.
The thing I'll say, the talent's there, has done some good things through the early part of the spring. Nick Saban, whenever Bryce has come up, has been complimentary of the progress that he's made. One of the interesting components of this will be the development as far as guys that he's going to be throwing the football to. So John Mechie, who's in position to be the lead receiver this year, is out for the spring while working back from an injury, which has opened the door for some other guys, specifically some of these younger guys, to be able to get experience, get reps. There are going to be some growing pains there that maybe wouldn't be the case if somebody as experienced as John Mechie is in there. But it will be very interesting to continue to track just the development, specifically of some of these young receivers that they're going to depend on to catch passes and contribute this year, to go along with guys like John Mechie and Slade Bolden. So, like with the scrimmage the other day, it sounds like Slade, which is to be expected, worked with the first team offense, but then you have Javon Baker, who, for good things about just the work that he's done behind the scenes during the course of the last year, but he's going to be dependent on now to play a much bigger role than what he played last year. So it sounds like he's one of the lead guys in the competition there, but has some other talented young receivers to go along with that, who at the very least have flashed through the early part of the spring, whether it's been Trayshawn Holden, who I know got some first team work the other day, or even some of the newcomers as far as true freshmen coming in, like Ja'Cory Brooks, who Cris obviously talked about earlier in the show, or other true freshmen like Christian Leary, a speed guy who brings that explosive dynamic to the receiver group, or another one, and Ajayi Hall, another true freshman who it sounds like is flashed early on and maybe could be a factor there in the competition to go along with some of those guys, or even an Xavier Williams, who's been around for a little while and had that touchdown catch in the scrimmage the other day.
Definitely worth keeping an eye on. We'll have more developments as we go through this week from Alabama spring practice. Obviously, we're also covering the Auburn Tigers and their ongoing spring practice as well. Guys, anything else catching your attention this week that doesn't necessarily have to be SEC football? What are we watching right now?
Well, I'm assuming you're watching one repeat, the new trailer for Loki.
You know it. John, you had something?
No, I'll just say, I mean, you kind of hit on the beginning of our talk here, but I found it interesting, watching the championship game last night. I would say Baylor's two best players, one of them was at Auburn, the other one was at Alabama.
Yes.
Before Baylor. So, a little bit of what could have been for both Auburn and Alabama there, that, Mitchell and Butler were both, fantastic Monday night, and, would have been, I'm sure both Bruce Pearl and Nate Oates would have enjoyed having those guys this year.
I think you can look at it both ways. I think you can certainly be disappointed about it if you're an Alabama or an Auburn fan. You can also look at it and say, like we've been hovering around basketball relevancy for a number of years now, and we're becoming more and more folded into the fabric of championship college basketball. And that's just maybe another sign of it, that you had two guys whose paths led them through Alabama and Auburn that were playing in the national title game. So we'll see. We'll see how long it will be before one of these two teams is back in the discussion again, the way they've been in the last two tournaments. Will that be a regular part of the NCAA tournament, talking about Alabama or Auburn or both of them, or were these two seasons, flashes in the pan?
I mean, because of 2020 getting canceled, Alabama can now claim a piece of the last two national championships, because you had Braxton P with UVA as well.
That's right. Yeah. Well, guys, thanks as always for joining me on First Downs Out. Thanks to Cris Dishman for joining us as our guest. And we will see you guys next week here.